So welcome to our last module in this topic, where we've been looking at evolution. We're now just going to spend a little bit of time considering some alternate theories or alternate viewpoints regarding about the creation of the world and the creation of life. So we'll just jump into that. So you can somewhat put the different views on evolution versus sort of what we might term creation on a bit of a scale. There is a wide range of views on how life was created, and even on this scale, it is a very sort of Western-centric scale. It doesn't even deal particularly well with different, particularly religious views outside of Western culture. It sort of touches on them a little bit, but it's still coming from a very Western point of view. And that's okay, it's just worth remembering that even this sort of doesn't give the full picture of the very, very, very wide range of views on how life was created. So generally speaking, we can sort of make a line between what we might call special creation all the way through down to evolution. So along this spectrum is sort of different people's views on what we might call intelligent design, the idea that there is some sort of intelligence behind the design and creation of the world and the universe, and different people sort of fall at different points along the spectrum for what exactly they believe. So, and this also has an impact on what we might think of as the age of the Earth. And so we might talk, some people might be more towards the young Earth end of the spectrum, and some people might be more towards the older Earth end of the spectrum. And that's really what this diagram's going through. So if we start right near special creation and young Earth, we end up sort of with a group of people who we might term flat earthers. They do and don't belong on this scale in some respects. Some flat earthers probably wouldn't belong in this scale if they had simply just believed that the world is flat, and it sort of has no bearing on their understanding of the creation of the Earth and the universe and life and that sort of thing. If it doesn't sort of interact with that, then they wouldn't really belong in the scale. But for those who do, they tend to fall right towards the special creation, young Earth, very extreme end of the scale, with a very specific view of the structure of the world. Moving a little bit away from them would be geocentrists, and these would be people who sort of believe that the Earth is at the centre of the universe, or centre of the I was going to say at the centre of the world, but that's not quite right. That the Earth is at the centre of the universe / I suppose solar system in a sense as well. This tends to be a bit of an antiquated view that's not really held much by anyone anymore. So it's sort of a bit put to the side. Then we get to young Earth creationism, and this is probably a more common viewpoint than the other two, although there are definitely some people who sort of fall between young Earth creationism and flat earthers, particularly if we watch the media a lot. A lot of them are grouped together, but not everyone who is a young Earth creationist, though, is also a flat earther. So there is a distinction there. They are different groups. And this tends to be people who sit more on the camp of taking Genesis literally as a literal 7-day creation. So this also comes with the viewpoint of the Earth being younger, and that everything was designed sort of as is. It's not necessarily a viewpoint that completely rejects evolution. It would reject evolution in the sense of what we might flippantly call monkeys to man. It would say that certain kinds and certain species were created by God as is, but that some of the variation we see is because of more adaptation, or what we might think of a little bit more as microevolution, but it tends to steer more clear of macroevolution or speciation as mechanisms for how life came to be as it is. So it doesn't completely do away with everything we've talked about. It certainly would still be okay with natural selection. It just tends to not view it as the means to say how humans were created. Moving along the line from that, we have gap creationism, which is similar, but works off the idea that that God created the earth, but there was a gap of time, and so the earth is sort of as old as what some scientists would say it is, and so it's sort of the young earth. It's very similar thinking to the young earth creationism, but that there has been a gap of time, and so things are actually really old. Moving along, you have day-age creationism, which would be more the sort of creationism where when Genesis says it was one day, it wasn't necessarily a literal 24-hour day. It was an age or a period of time. Progressive creation, not too different there, but moving along sort of from that, you get what we call theistic evolution. And this would be the viewpoint that God created everything and used evolution as a mechanism to do this. And this also would include the earth being quite old. From there, you get atheistic evolution, which is sort of everything we've talked about, but no involvement from God. So the only difference between theistic evolution and atheistic evolution is whether or not the person believes God was involved in it at all. So that's just actually quite a small summary of the different views on how life was created. Some of those views I've talked about it from a very Christian or Judeo-Christian biblical perspective, but some of those could also be applied to other peoples of other religions or other ways of thinking as well. It's not necessarily just Christian sort of thinking and that sort of thing, but is sort of the main point from which we're approaching this. Alright, so if you're in class, you can do this activity as your teacher directs. Otherwise, what you can do right now, in a moment, pause the video and pick one of the views from the scale on the previous slide. You need to do a bit of research and you need to write a bit of a summary of the view, identify its merits and identify the problems. So what's the supporting information for it? What's the stuff that might be an issue with this? If you're at home, you obviously won't be able to share with the rest of the class about this view, but you can just use this time to pick one of the views that you thought was maybe a bit interesting and look it up and find out a bit more about it. There is a link down the bottom that you can use to help you with that. So you can pause the video now and come back once you've done that. All right, so just a moment to sort of discuss what the Bible actually does say about the creation of the world and life. I'm going to turn now to Genesis chapters 1 and 2, which is the beginning of not just the Bible, but it talks about the beginning of the universe and of life. So that's what we're going to do now. So take this time to, again, pause the video and go and read through Genesis 1, chapter 1 and chapter 2. There is a link down the bottom to the this text on Bible Gateway, and you can just copy that into a Word document and go through and underline or highlight the sections that are mentioned, or the bits of passages mentioned in Genesis 1 and 2 that may seem to have conflict with what we've discussed as the theory of evolution. And as you're doing that, also sort of try and answer these three questions. What's the purpose of this text? What is the context? Who's it being written to? Who's it written for? And sort of how can we explain these bits that seem to have a bit of conflict with the theory of evolution? So go away and go and do that now, and then come back and we'll talk about the last little bit. Okay, so with Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, there's a lot going on there, and different people have different ways that they want to interpret it, how literally they interpret it in particular, or how much they want to view it as poetical. And, you know, there's lots of different views on the subject, but I think from sort of perspective that everyone can agree with, there's sort of three big truths sort of communicated in Genesis 1, that it doesn't matter if you want to necessarily be figurative or literal about how that text is being written, but you can all generally agree on that. The first point of Genesis 1 is that God is the creator. So it doesn't matter, any Christians should be able to come from Genesis 1 with that understanding. God created the world, and then that creation was very good. And finally, that humans were the only creatures made in the image of God. The process by which any of this was done, obviously that's a point that can be debated, but these sort of are three big truths that come out of Genesis 1. God created the world, creation is very good, and humans are the only creatures made in the image of God. So those are some big truths and some big ideas to think about. We'll leave that there. That brings us to the end of this unit. Remember, if you want, if there's anything you didn't get from this video or you didn't quite understand, you can always go back and rewatch it. You can speed things up and you can slow them down. And if you've got any more questions, don't forget, you can always ask your teacher for help. Anyway, that is all for this. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.